should not be considered. But what image are they creating? It's a contradiction. Somebody claims to be a liberator, and then he comes up with nepotism as the fulcrum of his activities. And so people out. So even in Parliament, there was that question. And some ODM and Azimio people were furious because Raila's brother, Oburu, was supposed to be getting all the committees, and the others were not getting it. You know,
the sister is a governor and what not.
Is this? You know, terrible. What's this? So Raila has a terrible image.
Yes.
Which maybe accounts for his frequent losses. Because when people think, is that what you want?
Yes.
He said no. So he has to clean up his image. And appearing to be a nepotist is not very good.
And without overpraising the third president, let me just say here, without any fear of contradiction, Mwai Kibaki would never nominate his brother, his son, or Judy, his daughter. I know them.
But there's...
Mwai Kibaki, hear what I'm telling you. Tony was a year ahead of me.
Right.
I know the family well. Mwai Kibaki would never nominate his brother, his daughter, or his son.
It's actually the nephew alone.
In fact, when Jimmy Kibaki began this thing, Prof, called Simama Kenya, I remember he went to the dad and said this, and the dad told him, because they had collected some money, he told him, be very careful kuchukua pesa ya watu, kuanzisha vitu, because Jimmy is also not a politician. And Simama Kenya died a very natural and quiet death, na pesa ikarudisha kwa. He would never. And that speaks volumes.
Let's allow Professor finish and then we come to you.
So, I was saying there is a problem for Raila. And the same thing with Kalonzo. I mean, they fight very hard to put their children there.
Looks very bad.
And then forget.
Is it not so natural for, say, like a dad or a mom to say that, you know, I've gone this direction and I think it's a noble direction, I'd love for my kids to take it up. And perhaps this is a way of shaping them into the space.
Look at General Muhoozi. Look at the behavior of General Muhoozi. You know, you don't be a general if Museveni was. You know, we have to choose, Prof. Either we are building democracy or we are building there's no
we should make a distinction.
Yes.
Somebody who brings himself up.
Yes.
And somebody who is just lifted.
Okay.
Yes.
Raila Odinga, with all his problems, and he has a lot of them, give him credit for being a politician.
Yes. And building himself up.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Of course, it did not hurt that he was the son of Jaramogi.
Exactly, the first vice president. Yeah.
But there is a record of Raila fighting to be a politician.
Yes.
Correct.
And therefore deserving to be there. What he's doing about nepotism thing is not. And I don't think his father is the one who did it for him.
Yeah.
The same thing with poor Kalonzo. Okay? It was lifted by Mulu Mutisia. And Moya. And now the performance, he's very eager to ensure that his son Kennedy and himself, they get jobs. So he has a job in South Sudan. And Raila has a job trying to build...
In a country where we have joblessness, it's terrible.
You have the image they are projecting. They would like to be considered as liberators, which they are not. And right now, Raila and Kalonzo are fighting.
Quietly.
For this...
No, they are fighting openly as to who is the leader of the opposition.
Right. Yes.
So when Kalonzo does something, Raila has to counter it. And when Raila does something, Kalonzo has to... All they are doing is, they're not fighting Ruto, they're fighting each other.
Relevance.
Yes, so for 22...
And labeling others corrupt. And labeling others corrupt.
I know you want to say something about the Middle East, which is quite a huge conversation.
Yes,
because... where you have to... and overlook this other one of EALA.
Yeah, because I think my colleagues here in the panel have done some justice to the matter. And time has really flown, and you know, we are talking about Kenya's diplomatic relations, and you had said you would discuss about the Middle East. I want to bring to your attention one case, because there is a failure and a terrible failure somewhere. About 8 years ago, a Kenyan girl called Martha Nyaguthi, minor from Udhaya, went to Saudi Arabia. And for a few days, weeks, she was chatting with people back home. Then, all of a sudden, she went quiet. After a few months, photos of this girl in a Saudi Arabian hospital surfaced on the internet. Now the family tried to follow up. And to cut a long story short is that Mother Nyaguthi Maina, for 8 years, she has been lying in a coma, probably assaulted in a foreign land, lying in a hospital bed in Saudi Arabia.
Terrible.
It's terrible beyond words. Now, the most complicated part of this, even if the family raised 100 million today, they cannot just go and access the girl. It is upon the Kenyan government to take up this issue. You can imagine if that girl was an American.
Exactly.
For 8 years, this girl has never been seen by a Kenyan doctor. We need that girl to be accessed by Kenyan doctors. They are certain what happened to her. Then they are certain whether she can be brought back home. And because the government is the government, it should act in the interest of its citizens. The Kenyan government should know or should follow up to know what happened to this girl. Then, if this girl is repatriated, it's upon the government to know. Because now you see the other complication is that this is not a girl who is coming to go home. She has to come and go to a hospital. Then the government should know who is paying for these bills. Because I think the government of Saudi Arabia should be held accountable.
Sure.
Those guys who took that girl there, you see? And it is very sad, even as this girl has stayed there for 8 years. Another girl now last week was calling me from Iraq on WhatsApp and telling me she's in a detention camp. She was badly beaten. She has been detained. The agents have been thrown out of this country. It's a very serious matter.
Yeah.
The Kenya Kwanza government, we have a lot of hope in it. But this issue of Mother Nyaguthi Maina, now I think I campaigned so hard for Kenya Kwanza. If they resolve this issue.
But why don't you go? Why don't you go and see Alfred Mutua? Why don't you go? You are an elected member.
I'll go with you.
Yeah,
it is Mother and many other ladies that
Yes.
are going through this. Just what goes into some of these, contracts that are there between governments. And the reality is this. While we keep telling these girls, perhaps this is not a safe haven, this is not the...
It brought a lot of issues and a lot of pressure because he was a Saudi Arabian native. American citizen, something that roped in even President Khashoggi, exactly, that roped in President Donald Trump. The kingdom is one of the wealthiest in the world because of oil. It's also absolutely and apparently racist. These things are done knowing well that Kenya is a third world country, a country that cannot respond quickly towards the welfare and interest and well-being of its citizens. This is what must change as far as foreign policy goes. There must be a little more aggression. Mheshimiwa here needs to go and see CS Alfred Mutua. I think Mutua is global in mind and knowledgeable enough to understand the issues and to take a more forward-leaning posture to secure the interest of Kenyan citizens. Kenyan citizens are being brutalized, tortured, maimed, killed, and it's completely unthinkable. And this is what happens when you destroy your own economy and your kids now turn out basically in the modern day to be slaves. Slaves in, this is not, especially you who comes from Mau Mau country, this is not why we fought for independence. For our own children to be at the service and behest of in foreign nations and being raped and sodomized and killed and brutalized, it's completely unthinkable. And so the president has a lot on his plate. It is work of cabinet to assist the president and to guide him along. I think CS Mutua, once he gets a bit of momentum on this issue, the president can then come in. And I've spoken about this several, even when I've spoken about what we need to do to alleviate poverty. The president needs to have the courage, and he is a young man, to even meet with the king, Fahd of Saudi Arabia, or his father, his aged father, to negotiate special rates at which we import oil.
Yeah.
Special rate. You know, they have money. So you just say, this is what we need, and this is what we can do together. We also export a lot of meat products to them because we have wonderful lamb, again in your place, Nyahururu region. So this is a very sober conversation that can be had, rather than innocent blood being shed in this manner.
Yeah.
For the very downtrodden, you know, his constituent, maybe some of who have never even reached Nairobi, let alone reach Saudi Arabia. Some who are going to Saudi Arabia to Riyadh for the first time, hitting 2 cities in one day. Unatoka Nyeri, unafika Jomo JKIA for the first time ever. Unatoka JKIA na ndege unaruka tena for the first time ever to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. You're not the kind of person with knowledge, confidence, etc. like Mheshimiwa.
Professor.
So this is what must be done, because to not do that is to fail the Kenyan citizens.
Right.
And like I said earlier in the broadcast, Linda, we must not countenance mediocrity in any way. We must not be okay with it because it's not my sister or my relative. This is a fellow Kenyan.
And
I
mean, 8 years.
You really need to push on this, and I'll do that with you in solidarity as a brother.
Prof, I agree with the gentleman. 8 years, first of all, is no joke. So what is this international relations that we keep studying?
Exactly. What's our foreign policy?
Just what is this as we sum it up?
Well,
Its significance, importance.
The way one country relates to another in its own interest.
And I would want to assume that all these matters then lie therein.
They are there. Even
are we slave providers?
Of, Saudi Arabia, or China, or America, or Russia, is simply how Kenya relates to those others in its own interest. And the starting point is itself. Do Kenyans know Kenya? Do we have policy makers who know Kenya and Kenya's interest? Sometimes we have people who have no idea what Kenya's interest is, and therefore they will not know how to project it and protect it. So that's the starting point. Then our neighbors are critical. So South Sudan, Somalia, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, and now Congo. These are critical to Kenya. And so Kenya must do everything possible to ensure that there is order and stability, because when they fight over there, what happens? So they end up in Nairobi. So it is in Kenya's interest to ensure that they are doing well, because Kenya will be doing well. If they are doing badly, we lose. And then when you go outside the continent, it's another matter. What is it that is driving you towards that? Now, it could be a question of resource oil. It could be just good image. It's political. It could be food. Now we've been told, I think it's awkward, that there people are hungry because Europeans are fighting in Europe. See, now that does not make sense. But it can. So you have to deal with it. How then is it possible that people fighting in Ukraine affect your food? Something is wrong somewhere. You look at the Chinese. They are the most strategic people in the world today, because they have penetrated every part of the world. And they're getting away with things. They have the
benefit of numbers as well.
So how then do Kenyans and others relate to the Chinese moves or to the American moves? And the two are fighting, and sometimes they want to fight over in Kenya.
Over this,
so you have to know that and say, no. You two fight your things out there, but not here. So international relations requires people in positions of influence and policy to know all these things, so that they protect the interest of the country from those others.
Yes.
If they don't do that, then they fail. If they fail, the country is in a mess. Partly that's what
needs to be required.
So Somalia is suffering from it.
Which is quite
it's a proxy country.
Yeah.
And you don't want Kenya to be a proxy country too.
All right. I hope that the gentleman then will proceed to the tourism minister, and some of these matters then are going to be addressed differently. Highly and squarely goes back to the table of the leadership, and that is what we're looking forward to. Gentlemen, we have to close it on this very point. It was nice having you, Professor Macharia Munene, foreign policy analyst, and of course, great insights right there. Benji Ndolo, political strategist, and lastly, Mheshimiwa, member of County Assembly of Chinga Ward in Nyeri County, Honorable Kiruga Dhuku. This very point, 10 minutes to the top of the